Is atheism a rational worldview? Hi, my name is Calvin Smith and welcome to Creation Basics, where our goal is to make God's creation part of your everyday conversation. And today's topic is the atheistic worldview. Is it really rational? Well, let me tell you a story. Years ago, I was speaking at an event in British Columbia, and when I stepped off the platform, I saw a fellow approaching and thought, well, it's probably not going to be an overly pleasant conversation. He announced himself as an atheist and the professor of philosophy at the local university, and began aggressively informing me how kind of ludicrous he thought my presentation on God's existence and the Bible being really real history was. And as often happens in these informal debate settings, a crowd began to gather around. So after firing off a bunch of scientific proofs supporting the story of evolution, he paused, to kind of see my reaction. And because he had a PhD in philosophy, I took a different tack than I usually would, and the conversation kind of went something like this. I said, so you're a professor of philosophy here, sir, and philosophy includes the study of epistemology, of how you can know things. Isn't that correct? And he confirmed both. So I said, well, can you tell me then one thing that you know for certain and how you came to know it? Now he kind of looked at me annoyed and asked what I meant. So I asked him again to tell me one fact or bit of knowledge that he knew for certain and how he came to know it. And he said, well, I know I'm standing here. So I asked him, well, how do you know that? So he put his finger on my chest and said, well, because I can see you and I can touch you and I can feel the floor. And he tapped the ground a couple of times with his foot. So I said, so what you're telling me is that your five senses are informing you that you're here, correct? To which he said, well, of course. But how do you know that your senses are actually working, I asked. How do you know they're working correctly? How do you know you just aren't some brain in a jar somewhere being fed impulses that make you think you're really here? I mean, how do you know you're not in the Matrix? This is all just isn't an illusion. You can't just tell me that your senses are confirming that your senses are confirming, because that'd be a circular argument, right? And so he caught on to what I was saying and he said, well, yeah, actually, I can't know anything for certain, but neither can you. So I said, okay, just to confirm here, what you're saying is that in your worldview as an atheist, you have no way or mechanism of being able to know anything for certain? And he said, well, no, ultimately, but then again, he added, well, but neither can you. So I said, wait a minute. I'm a Christian. I believe in the God of the Bible, who's all-seeing, all-knowing, omnipotent, exists outside of time, and so on. Now, if the God of the Bible exists, could he give his creatures faculties and reveal information, revelation, so that they could know things for certain? Well, I don't believe in God, he said, kind of waving his hand, trying to dismiss my argument. So I said, I know that's what you're professing, but that's not what I'm asking. I'm asking if the God of the Bible exists, could he do that? Could he give his creatures abilities so that they could know things for certain? Well, of course he could because he's God, he said, kind of rolling his eyes. And I said, okay, so let's get this straight. What you're saying is that in your atheistic worldview, if it's true, you can't know anything for certain. But if my worldview is true as a Christian, I can know things for certain? Well, absolutely, he said. But I don't believe in your God. I looked at him and I said, absolutely? You know that absolutely? I thought you just told me that if your worldview is true, that you couldn't know anything for sure. So how do you know that with certainty? And that was basically where the conversation ended as he kind of muttered and walked away. You see, logically, simply to be able to have an argument or discussion concerning the truth of any topic, you must assume we exist, logic's real, and that knowledge is attainable. But as the atheist professor confirmed, if someone doesn't start with the idea of God's existence, nothing can be assumed with certainty, which means knowledge is actually not possible. You can't know anything for certain. So, is atheism rational? No. Far from what many people might think, atheism is by far the weakest of worldviews, which is likely why God's word says, the fool says in his heart, there is no God. Hey folks, Calvin here. Subscribe to the channel, ring the bell, share the content, click the button, blah, blah, blah. I know, you've heard it so often, it's just annoying. But here's the thing. If you're enjoying this content and want other people to benefit from it as well, kind of think of it as donating to our Answers in Genesis Canada advertising campaign without having to spend a dime. We want to be good stewards of your support. And of course, advertising is very expensive. But with the algorithms set up the way they are, it's kind of like getting these platforms that are often quite unfriendly to Christian content to promote gospel outreach for free. And if you've been blessed by this content, understand the importance of biblical authority, and have the means, please consider giving a one-time gift or becoming one of our monthly supporters by clicking the link below. Stay blessed.